Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to 2021 Vision Week. At Modern Sales Pros, our goal is to create an environment where our community members can answer the most difficult questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own. Given it's mid-October, we pulled together 2021 Vision Week to help you all with the biggest challenges that you face with annual planning. Vision Week wouldn't be possible without the help of our amazing sponsors. And today's session on building and making kick-ass compensation plans is brought to us by the team at Concert. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we jump into and get to meet our amazing panelists today. First things first, please do submit your questions using the Q&A panel. You'll be able to comment and upvote on others' questions, and that's a really helpful tool for us as questions come in. We can work together as a team up here to make sure we get the best and the questions answered as fully as possible. And secondly, for those of you who maybe this is your first 2021 Vision Week event, please do join the 2021 Vision Week Slack channel. This is your opportunity to chat with have conversations with our panelists, also to meet other folks who are in attendance here this week. And to be honest, it's a pretty cool way to share 80s memes with each other. So with that, today is our second to last session on Revenue Team Thursday. These are all sessions that have been focused around setting your revenue organization up for success. This morning, we talked about building bench strength and identifying emerging leaders. This early afternoon, we had discussed territory planning and design. And now we're going to talk about one of the most important topics. You've got your people, you've got your territories. How do we actually set the comp plans up to make sure that our team and our revenue organization is successful? Really, really excited to be joined by Sanj. We've heard him talk a bunch of times at MSP, and every time it's the most amazing intersection of how to actually do this stuff and how your brain works. So I'm going to hand it over to Sanj to introduce himself. Sanj?
Thanks, Rich. I'm Sanj Sanampudi, co-founder and CEO of Concert. Concert is a commission software, except we don't just do like the Excel mathy part of getting people paid on time. We also have features in our software that recommend the comp plans and the targets that are right for your team and help you budget for them. Before Concert, I was a CFO. So if I start talking about math and Excel too much, just let me know.
And my name is Ethan Zubek. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of CM Group. We are a portfolio of digital marketing brands focused primarily on email and digital channels. We're a good-sized business. We've got about 650 people in offices around the globe, and many of the brands we operate are those folks know and love: Campaign Monitor, Delivra, Emma, LiveClicker, SailThrough, and Vuture. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, so I'm responsible for all new business, sales engineering, sales consulting, and partners across our portfolio. Interesting component about our business is that we've got ASPs from $1,000 a year all the way up to millions of dollars a year. So we've got a wide range of themes and deal sizes we cover. So this is particularly interesting and important. And I just want to say, I've also, Rich, I've been, as you know, a member of this of Modern Sales Pro for years. It's an amazing community, and you guys do great work for the SaaS selling community. So keep it up, and thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us too. It's with such great experience and perspective. It's surprising that we haven't had you on sooner, but we're glad to have you here, Ethan. And folks, just one more housekeeping note. You heard Ethan, he's got a little bit of everything under his remit, from average sale prices of $1,000 all the way up through sales engineering and big complex enterprise sales. This is your chance to ask all of the questions you may have about building comp plans that will work for your team in 2021. So please do use the Q&A panel. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sanj, and he's going to walk us through our agenda for today, and then we're going to jump right in.
Cool, thanks, Rich. So for today, you're going to be getting some poll questions along the way, and those poll questions are going to be tied to some of the recommendations we're going to talk about a little bit later. So please take a moment to answer the questions as they come up. For our agenda, we're going to go through the science of commissions. So as we were developing Concert's platform, we started working with neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists. One really important thing to know about comp is it is a significant lever in rep productivity. And we'll walk you through why that is and kind of where we get it wrong along the way, you know, where I always got it wrong from the CFO perspective. Turns out I should not have just been ramping up your quotas. And then keeping with the 80s theme, we're going to go back to the future. So CM Group, as Ethan mentioned, is an incredibly complex organization, but they started 2021 back in July. So we'll learn some of the lessons that Ethan learned through his comp planning process and some of the recommendations he has for what made it easier this go around. And then we'll kind of wrap up with Q&A and some key takeaways.
Awesome. All right, Sanj, let's jump into it. I'm excited. I've seen this a few times and it's amazing every time I see it. So here, I'm gonna hand it over. Oh, come on, there we go.
Okay, so Rich and Ethan know this, and we turned off chat. So the most common marathon finish time, we're going to show you a little graph of how people finish marathons. Once Rich can advance slides, and it's 3 hours and 59 minutes. The really interesting part of marathon finish time, so is if you look at the graph over to the right. What you'll notice is the graph is actually multimodal. So as you're approaching a milestone time, you see performance increase and then dramatically drop off after that milestone time. So when you look at 3:59 being the most common time, you should probably feel a few things. Like, one, I really need to work out a lot more. But two, you should also recognize that there is a 40% drop off after 4 hours. So the difference between 3:59 and 4:01 is a 40% drop off. So that should make you feel like the quotas you're setting are really effed. Now that everyone feels bad, we can go into like the science of why you feel bad. So it turns out the big thing that we're all missing is that commission plans are a feedback loop. And Rich, if you advance here. And the real problem that we have is a lot of us worry about like the commission itself, how much money is at the end of it. And, you know, I know from my own experience, we're kind of like, oh, if I put a 30% incentive at the end of this, like, you know, the number's just going to happen. It's that old attitude of reps being coin operated, which is false. That's why comp plans are typically seen as ineffective and an afterthought. But what we can learn from this marathon story is actually that, move forward, is that quotas are the mechanism to motivate. We're target driven. Human beings just want to achieve things. And when we acknowledge that we're target driven, we're able to see a few more things. So moving forward.
There it is.
So the first is that targets create physiological changes in your body. So your blood pressure and your heart rate actually increase when you have a moderately challenging target. Like, this doesn't just mean, you know, running a marathon. Your blood pressure and heart rate increase even if you see a puzzle you can solve. Your body is physically preparing you to move when you have a moderately challenging target. The other thing, and this is like a little bit harder to interpret, but if you see the saturated white parts of these brain images, so both in the win case and the near win case, the same white parts are lit up on this. these are the neural pathways that are associated with learning. So whether you're winning or you're even engaged with the process of trying to win, you're actually learning. You might not get the same chemical rushes, which are kind of the red and yellow pieces there, but your brain is actually learning. And that doesn't happen when you're not engaged. If we move to the next slide. So all of this is like, okay, fine, targets. I'm not going to lower my quota. And the important thing to learn, the important thing that I think Ethan will help us understand is that smarter targets aren't just lower. So there are 4 dimensions of how we can perceive targets. The first is the magnitude of the target. So yes, lower targets typically will get people more engaged, but it's not the only way to increase engagement. So there is the temporal dimension where if you're bringing really long time frames up to the current time period, you can engage people with their targets. There's the experiential dimension where if people have done something before, if they know how to go through the motions, if they're clearly scripted out for them, then they're more likely to engage with that target. And the final piece is social. So if everyone else is doing it, you're more likely to do it. So just a couple more slides. So the real trick to why targets matter so much is they translate these abstract goals that you're putting out there into really specific, relevant tactics. And this all happens subconsciously and automatically. It really reduces the pressure on some of the other tools and enablement functions that you have in place to get your reps performing. And we've seen this in our own work. So smarter targets increase rep productivity. I'll give you the super example that we saw with one customer. They had a quota of $50,000 a month. Their team on average was closing about $30,000 a month. We, through our algorithm, recommended that they drop quota, and they did by 15%. And over the next 3 months, they saw their individual rep performance increase by 15%. And if $4,500 a month doesn't seem like a big deal to you, this company that we worked with had over $1 million of ARR simply by adjusting their targets. They didn't change pricing, they didn't add products, they didn't add coaching, they didn't add new managers. This was all about activating and unlocking that potential within their reps. So when we're talking about comp for kind of the rest of this session, we're going to talk to you about boring things like math of how you get a budget approved and contracts. But we're also going to really talk to you about engaging your reps more meaningfully.
I think that's an important part about this. This is if the lessons that Sanj and Concert have learned from working with Ethan. These are a lot of principles and a lot of things that you're going to have to take back and bring into your organization and see exactly how it applies to you. But these are very, very sound first principles proving, as Sanj has said, both through the way that our brains actually operate and through, I don't think there's anybody on the call right now who would be upset about another million in ARR next year. I think most folks would say, yeah, I'm game. So keep that lens in mind. The other thing I will say, some of this is counterintuitive. It may make you feel a little bit uncomfortable to hear some of the things we're going to advocate for. That is okay. That means that you are alive and you've been you're thinking about things in a new way. And that's what we're looking for here. So I'm excited for this part of the convo. I'm not gonna lie, gentlemen. So shorter quota time periods. I think this is something we've talked about, Sanj, you and I, even prior to pulling this programming together. Certainly an interesting concept, but can you chat a little bit about how, and why this is important and what you've seen?
Yeah, so, just touching upon the survey, and I think everyone will get a copy of the survey that we ran with the survey report. We polled about a little over 90 companies and 9,000 reps in this year's State of Sales Comp survey. It turns out most people are giving you either monthly or quarterly quotas. I think we specifically are advocating for quarterly quotas. I think we can also see what the poll results are for this group.
Yeah, we sure should be able to.
Hey, lots of annual, lots of quarterly.
Interesting.
Okay, cool. Is there another slide in here?
There is. There's one more after this bad boy.
Cool. So the psychology of, we're going to tell you, and Ethan can explain like what he's done at CM Group and kind of the results that he's seen, but we're going to recommend that you shorten your quota periods. So the way we talk about these examples is through, like, imagine you're saving for retirement. Is it easier to imagine that you need $1.7 million in 40 years, or that you should set aside $500 this month? It's really hard to think about time periods that really are far out of your line of sight. The most famous study done on temporal distance asked people about a vacation that they want to take next year. And when they ask people about the vacation they want to take, they're like, well, I'd like to go somewhere warm, maybe a beach. When they ask people about the vacation that they want to take 2 weeks before the vacation happens, they start talking about, I want to eat at this restaurant. I want to read this book. The shorter time period automatically forces you to think much more concretely about what you're going to do. And when we translate that to sales, I think this is animated, that means, across the board, shorter time periods. So if you're doing annually, we'll say try to move to quarterly. If you're doing quarterly, try to move to monthly. And even in that, if you're paying on closed one, try to move, and you have a really long sales cycle, try to find ways to introduce incentives earlier in the process. But Ethan can talk a little bit about their journey in moving to monthly.
Sure, Sanj. So we have, as I mentioned at the outset, we've got brands that sell deals ranging in size from $9 a month up to some millions a year. Two broad buckets of corporate sellers and enterprise sellers. And the way I've been doing this for a long time, I've been doing the same comp plans, a version of the same comp plan basically the entire time, where for the enterprise sellers, they had an annual target and quarterly targets, and those were the two time periods we paid on. For the corporate sellers, we had monthly and quarterly targets, and much more heavily weighted to quarterly. Monthly, the monthly target was almost an afterthought. So we started our fiscal year on July 1, as you said. It's one of the pleasures of having one of your legal entities be an Australian entity. You're required to have a fiscal year start July 1. So we had the opportunity, also coming out of COVID, to rethink how we were going to put these things together. And I'd spent a good amount of time listening to Sanj's content and the challenging propositions he was making to shorten. So we ultimately accepted the supposition that shorter time periods would work. I trust the science. So we moved the entire organization, regardless of size of deal, to monthly targets as the primary measure of their compensation. And then there's a little bit of a kicker for hitting a quarterly target. Folks know what their annual number is, but we switched the way their comp was weighted to monthly. And on the corporate deals, the smaller, much more transactional selling, we didn't build into the comp plan weekly targets, but we spiff on weekly targets, and we tested that in our Q4, which is calendar Q2. And what we found was, by giving our corporate sellers weekly targets and spiffing them on that, we improved the conversion rate from 23% to 27%. So 4 nominal points over that period. There was a 17% improvement when we kicked it off in May to June. The result was near immediate. And that change ended up creating, we did the math and we figured out we had 7% more bookings in that quarter because of those weekly targets than we would have had otherwise. That is, like, we're a big business, a few points matter. It was a dramatic impact. So early results were extremely promising. On the larger enterprise side of things, it takes a quarter or two to make the turn, because you've got close dates and pipeline set. Like when deal cycles are 6, 7, 8, 9 months, it takes a bit to turn the ship. But in the dialogue that we hear reps and their managers having as far as close dates and timelines, they're talking about this month, next month, not this quarter. So we're already seeing that start to have some impact.
Yeah, and I would just add to that kind of a good gauge of whether you should really consider moving to monthly is how many of your reps are ending a month with $0. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've seen across the board when people move to monthly is they have fewer 0 months. And those 0 months, like, just CFO me, it just kills your CAC. Yeah. It like makes absolutely no sense. So I think, on the one side, I think you manage the 0 months by, like, if you put targets there, people are more likely to do something in the month. I would say that the other point that we should probably bring up is like the notion of like what happens when you fall behind. So if you have annual quotas and you're only at 25% of your goal right now, like what are you doing for the rest of the year? That target is no longer relevant to you. And especially in this environment, you have no idea what the world is going to look like a year from now. It's hard to believe that you can get quota right the first go.
Yeah, it's demoralizing when you're a rep and you're giving it everything you can, and you see you have everything tied to a big number at the end of the year, and you just feel like, man, that's just going to be out of reach for me. So you take your foot off the gas. It's human nature. So when you pull the gates forward, it just gives people to work toward, and it's more rewarding, it's more fun, it's more gratifying.
I love that. And I think it's something, again, as we said at the outset, some of this is going to be a little counterintuitive and maybe make people feel a little bit squirrely, but the science is there. And I think part of the reason that this works, and Ethan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you and the team did around paying on behaviors and paying on things like pipeline generation in terms of as you sort of adjusted those goals and pulled the gates closer, as it were.
Sure. So there are a couple of different camps on this. On the seller side of things, we know that certain activities drive results. So we measure and manage to certain behaviors, but we continue to pay on close-month bookings from a selling standpoint. But where the idea of behaviors is really interesting is on the SDR and the BDR front. So in our world, SDR is inbound lead qual, and BDR is outbound pipeline generation. So Sanjay made some recommendations that we align our measurement and comp for SDRs and BDRs more tightly to their behaviors, and specifically to behaviors that they could control. Right. So one of our BDR managers had a problem with this. He had said, look, my reps get excited at the idea of a payout on a closed one, on having a little bit of a rider of that. That's nice, but the reality is they have no control over that aspect of the process, but they do have control over how quickly they get on leads, how quickly they process them, how many they do. So we adjusted the behaviors and pulled it forward to things that they could control. So there's a greater sense of agency over
it. Ethan, I think you guys do one interesting thing on the CS side. Can you tell how you guys are paying on behaviors for the CS side?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something. Ella Turchilla is our SVP of customer success, and this is something that she really supported. Is most CS organizations index really heavily on basically on net retention, right? Like at the end of the day, like hit this net retention target. Don't care how you get there. I'm oversimplifying, of course, but on the dollars. The reality is that for a customer success individual, there are some things that are simply outside of their control. But what's not is the quality of experience that they deliver for the customer. And one of those things is the idea of a QBR for larger accounts doing a QBR. So we put in place, Ellen had this in place at Sailthrough. It was very effective, and she deployed it across the entire portfolio, where all reps, all customer success reps who own an account, part of their comp, and a not insignificant part of their comp, is tied to completing the QBR, because we know that that helps with adoption, with understanding the value proposition, with engagement with us as a company. So even if there's some corporate mandate that, hey, you have to switch to Salesforce, and that account happens to churn, the quality of the experience with us was so good and so rewarding that when they go someplace else, and everybody does, the likelihood of them coming back or referring to peers is much higher.
Yeah, I think that is like one of the smartest like plan design elements I've ever heard of. And I think it's really important, especially for the folks who are in charge of CS teams here, to kind of think about that. In our survey results, we saw that CS has the lowest satisfaction scores around comp. I think it's averaging closer to 2 out of 5. And you get low scores even from companies that have 0% of variable comp associated with CS. So like no one knows what to do with that team. And it's in part like paying people on what they actually control, the behaviors and activities that they do that you think drive the business forward. So kind of tying back to why would you pay someone on anything but the company outcome? And it's really about the experiential distance. It's about like, how do you translate that theoretically this stuff should get you a good outcome to practically what do you do for it? And the way to kind of accommodate that or think about that from a 401k standpoint is like, you take out the thinking of what you're supposed to do. So instead of like asking people to deposit money to a retirement account, like pull it out of your checking account, put it into a retirement account, it's much more effective when you're automatically deducting it from a paycheck. And if you move forward, so for sales, like we have a few recommendations for this. It's really like thinking about the experience that your customers have, thinking about what journey they're going on, and assigning quotas based on that prior performance. So not growth projections of like, you think you're going to close this much business, but more projections on, well, that would mean you need this many leads. That means that you need to book this many meetings. That means you need to book this many demos. So find those critical assumptions of where your conversion rates are changing. And then in addition to that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, it's really thinking about achievement tiers. I think that tees up the next topic pretty well. You can read this, but this is all right. Also, like just paying on the things your reps control. Think about the leading indicators of those outcomes versus the outcomes themselves. From kind of a staffing, resourcing, finance perspective, if you're paying on the leading indicator, you're going to know what's wrong before you're like, ah, crap, I have to reduce like 2/3 of my team. Like that.
Go ahead.
And then, you know, the scientific reason of why this matters is when people don't win, which you're selling, you're not going to win 100% of the time. But when you don't win, that is a negative feedback signal. So what your brain does by survival instinct is it takes that and says, don't do that thing again. But the right behaviors position you to win. They don't actually lead to a win. So by giving positive feedback there, you're reinforcing the correct behavior.
It's one of those counterintuitive points where if you've ever been in a bullpen where the average attainment was 30 or 40%, it's just like, oh, cool. We're all kind of in this together, versus if everybody's winning and you're the odd person out, you go, oh, all right. Oh, this is maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe there's something I should be doing differently here, because we know how to do it as an organization. One of the ones that I think is also a little bit counterintuitive here is multiple accelerators. I think conventional wisdom, you hear, no more than 3 accelerators in a comp plan. Sales reps aren't smart. They don't know how to do math. Like, don't make it too complicated. But Ethan, you did a couple things here that I think are relatively interesting to share.
Yeah, one thing is if you have sales reps who don't know how to do math, then you have the wrong sales reps. Like that's they're real good at doing math when it comes to figuring out how they're going to get paid. There is something to be said for having too many components to the plan, where they just don't know really like what matters. There's just too many levers to pull. And then there's also this notion of too many accelerators or too few. We view this as there's the Goldilocks dilemma. I really like that. I was listening to as I was working with Sanj and the team and thinking about this. I got actually pretty attached to this notion of gates and like people pressing to hit to the next one. So I kind of over-indexed on when we were modeling out the plans, asking our finance team to add too many tiers. Sanj and his team backed it down a little bit, and the idea of having a few tiers. So below 100%, you have sort of a base rate, then a couple of tiers up to 100%, and then a couple after that. So you continually give the reps something to strive for. Is where we settle.
I think that one makes a ton of sense, and I think that's also sometimes you hear conventional wisdom around like there's a certain number that you want to have on there, and I think that 3 to 4 is generally a good sweet spot here.
Indeed.
Yeah, if you guys move forward, I can tell you exactly why. So this is the psychology concept of social distance, the OG social distance. And this is really the sentiment of other groups versus my group. Like, how do you define your identity? And what's interesting about this is identity actually is probably the thing that demands the most cognitive attention from people. So if you really want to change performance, you're going to make this part of their identity. So in the retirement example, when companies publish how many people are saving in the 401k plan, it massively increases the number of people who participate. In the notion of setting targets, setting quotas, probably this is the most damaging thing. And probably the most kind of counterintuitive thing, challenging thing for most people is like, if you believe that everyone shouldn't hit quota, you're doing it wrong. And think about it, if 50% of your team isn't hitting quota, it's like, it's a coin toss. I know, like on this call, like Ethan hit quota, Rich didn't, whatever. But if 80% of your team is hitting quota and I didn't hit quota, suddenly it's a lot more about me, not about the number that was set. And who am I? Am I one of the good performers, or am I someone who's really struggling? And who do I ask for help? Well, if 50% of the team is hitting target, like I know there are only a handful of people, and do I feel comfortable with any of them? If 80% of the team is hitting target, I have someone that I can kind of safely go to. I think this point is really, really missed, and I think sit with it for a second if you really don't believe it. Email me. There are a lot of reasons why optimizing around having most of your team be successful is really valuable.
Well, and I think I love the point that you make next, Sanj, about stretch goals, right? We've heard that. I mean, I think we've all had that. Oh, it's a stretch goal. So, those don't actually work though, do they?
Yeah. So this is all about like converting your. It's about converting your target to specific tactics. And if it's a stretch goal, you're not converting to tactics. It's not actually changing your performance or productivity. So ways that we can also apply it, like, you guys do need to hit real numbers. We need to hit real numbers. We're all kind of in the same boat here. So the way you can bridge that is thinking about setting more targets leading up to quota. And then after quota, you're also giving those star performers a place to go. So usually we'll see companies have, you get one rate up to quota and you get one rate after quota. And that ends up serving nobody well. So when you have these multiple tiers, what you can do is build a pathway up to quota, which kind of keeps people in the game. And then for those star performers who are beating quota, one of the big missed opportunities for them is you don't give them anywhere to go. So what you see from really, really elite athletes is they're in a class of their own. And I talk about Simone Biles a lot, the world's best gymnast. So she is in a class of her own. She went to the last World Championships, and the starting value of the things that she was going to do implied that she could fall on every single discipline in gymnastics and still win the gold. Her program is that much harder. But what she did instead is she rolled out 2 new skills that were harder than anything any female gymnast has ever completed. That's because she set internal targets of where to go. It's really hard for your reps to set those internal targets on their own. So by putting them out there for them, they're going to unlock more of that productivity that they didn't know they had in them. They have the skills to do a lot better. You just need to help them realize it.
And there's a bunch of live questions coming in. I want to take a few here. This first one's from Austin, Austin in Salt Lake City, and it's just a question around sort of gaming the system, right? Gaming the comp plan. Are quotas with shorter intervals easier to game, or do you find that tighter windows kind of make the right behaviors happen more frequently? So more qualified opportunities, more pipelines generated, whatever
Sure.
it might be.
Yeah. So we thought about that. It's a good question. It's an important question. In some ways, an obvious one. You always have to ask that question when you're structuring your comp plans. And we decided no. We decided that the benefits outweighed the risk. And part of why we felt comfortable doing that is that as an organization, we're pretty good with pipeline management and forecasting. We've got really clean Salesforce opportunity records. Our reps are pretty disciplined. Those who aren't don't work there anymore. So we've got pretty good fidelity on pipeline. Our managers know the deals as well, and we've got a highly collaborative selling environment. But we did worry about that a little bit because the way these plans are structured, you over attain on a month, man, you're getting paid. What we actually found is that it's starting to pull, it's meeting the objective. We're starting to pull deals forward, right? Because they are actually trying to game the system, but in the way that we want, which is pull as much bookings in as we can as fast as possible, because there's a little bit of like, let me close this thing now, let me get the deal off the street. My marketing team's pretty efficient. I know that the bucket's going to get filled. I want to hit that monthly target now. And it's pulling the bookings forward. This is for corporate as well as enterprise. Regardless, there was a question I know posed earlier. Regardless of the longer sales cycles, right? Because what happens when you have large on enterprise deals with larger sales cycles, it's pipeline management. Reps just park deals at the end of a quarter, and maybe they start pulling it forward. Well, now they're parking them in months and at the end of months. So instead of having 4 events a year, you now have 12. So you get a much more even distribution. With enterprise selling, longer deal cycles, it takes a quarter or 2 for that to start to level out. But we're really seeing it level out.
That also feels like a huge win. I know you said this before, but it feels like a huge win from a predictability and a cash standpoint as well. Yeah, if you've got 250K you can count on every month from the sales team versus $1 million at the end of the quarter. Yeah, that's interesting.
Nobody likes lumpy, right? At least of all finance, right? Steady is the way to go. And revenue, bookings are one thing. Revenue is calculated on time, right? So the earlier it is in the period, the more revenue you can recognize, the more value to the business.
And I would just add to that, so a couple of things. First, there was a study done out of Harvard that shows that sales reps have very, very little ability to push the timing of deals back. And that kind of makes sense, right? Like if a rep does a really good job creating a problem in that prospect's mind, well, that problem needs to be solved. No one likes living around with problems for an extra month so you can make 20% instead of 15%. But there was something like a 1% ability to influence timing. The other piece that I think I would just kind of hammer home that Ethan was saying is like, you know, you're allowed to create the sales process. You know, if you're concerned about deeper discounts, you tighten the discount range without approval. If you're concerned about more flexible payment terms, you say deals under this size can never get monthly billing. So you have a lot of control. It's not bad to exert it. It's just like establishing clear guidelines of the behaviors and the activities that people should engage in.
I think that's a phenomenal point. It's got a lot to do with discipline and disciplined operation, disciplined sales process back to the loop, right? It's about the playbook and running that very tightly. Another question coming in here as we kind of talk about this monthly goals, quarterly goals, and all of that. In the situation, Ethan, when you were talking about folks pulling things closer, mm-hmm. if somebody sets closes and sort of exceeds maybe multiple months, but doesn't necessarily hit their annual goal, do you run the risk of overpayment in that, or how would you account for a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is none of you work with finance to figure out the numbers, right? So our sample size is large enough. We ran the math and the models, played everything out, sort of back tested everything, and you're going to have big months, and you'll see some of those statements, and you'll be like, "Ooh, are we overpaying her on this?" But you know, the math says that it plays out, and actually in our models we come out a little bit ahead.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think it leads into our next section. Maybe.
There it is.
Yes, yeah. It does. So, like, you know, I think a lot of the concerns around here are like solved by math, right? So if you agree with these principles, like getting to the numbers that work for your CAC and your budget and your business is just math. Mm-hmm. So, like, you know, I would say, don't not do this because you're scared of math. Just get a friend to help you with the math. So I'll let Ethan tee up like how he got finance approval. They worked really well together.
I've got a couple of life rules. One is if there's bread pudding on the menu, always order it. Another is always just work closely with finance and legal in your selling organization. It's the way I've operated for years. It's just better that way. It's also respectful, right? Like those are tough jobs, so I've always collaborated very closely with my counterparts in finance and legal. Specifically with finance, like they were part of this process from the get-go. Absolutely, we talked about ideas together. We workshopped ideas. We did the math together. They were part of the process early on, and that's important. I mean, they're the ones that do the math. They do the modeling, and it eliminates surprises. It's aside from the bread pudding thing, another one of business is no surprises, right? So it eliminates surprises.
Yeah, I think those are, I mean, I'm not sure about bread pudding, but I think they're like largely good rules to live by. But if you flip over, so like the reason why like worrying about overpayment or like why you really need to partner closely with your finance team is that your averages, so like I'm pretty sure every business talks about averages. Our average conversion rate is this, our average rep closes this. When you really look at your averages, how many people are actually performing to the average? That average rep doesn't exist. So what we encourage people to do, and the reason why you need a buddy in finance is you have to think about ranges. not averages. And when you think about ranges, then your math becomes really hard. So Rich can move it forward a bit. So this is something a friend in finance can help with in Excel. If they can't, please, I think we have a blog post on it somewhere. You should run a simulation. This is a statistical tool called a Monte Carlo simulation, where you run 1,000 randomized scenarios through your model. And what those 1,000 randomized scenarios are going to do for you, oh man, spreadsheet wars. I was part of spreadsheet wars. It's horrible. So Rich, if you advance it ever.
There we go.
Like what you're actually doing here is like you both are becoming more comfortable with the plan. You're both trying to manage risk in different ways. Like one is the risk of like hitting the numbers that your investors are expecting, and to an extent you're concerned about that, but you're also concerned that this is a fair number or a fair plan for your team. So when you draw this full payout curve, what you end up seeing is in the low cases, in the high cases, in the medium cases, in the totally batshit crazy cases, how is your comp plan performing? When is it more expensive? When is it less expensive? When is there more variability? Your budget model on this is 1 point on this graph. So your likelihood of getting this right is very, very low. So once you do an analysis like this, once you see the full payout curve, you're not going to worry about this like finance approval. You're not worried about spreadsheet wars anymore, because you guys have a really holistic picture of what your comp plan could look like. And it just de-risks the whole plan.
Yeah.
It's some intense math, but the team at Concert also has a blog post that we'll share afterwards for those who want to go deep on Monte Carlo. Ultimately, though, I mean, we've got to roll this out to the team. We've got to make our reps feel really comfortable and understand what's going on here. And Ethan, you've got all sorts of different roles and the organization. How did you roll out some of these changes to your organization?
First of all, we take this very seriously. We got ahead of it. One of the things we had a bit of a unique challenge is that we grow organically and we grow by M&A. So we have 6 businesses that we brought together. I assure you, with 6 very different comp plans and comp models. So we took time and care to bring them together. So there was consistency. There was consistency for the managers, for the reps, as well as for finance and FP&A. And the way we worked hard on that, and we were thoughtful and deliberate about it, because it's important. You want to look how someone's going to behave. Read their comp plan. There are 2, in my estimation, there's 2 times that you can roll out and or amend a comp plan, and you really shouldn't amend it. And I'll make a comment on that in a second. One is at the beginning of a fiscal, and the other is the halfway point. You can't like change targets on folks and change the rules. Because of that, it's extremely important to consider the fact that a comp plan is a legal document. You can't, I've seen many comp plans where a sales manager has whipped ideas together on a doc, sent it out and said, here's the comp plan. You can't do that, right? If you have employees in states like California or in geos like the United Kingdom, these are legal documents that have legal ramifications on the business if rolled out incorrectly. So you've got to coordinate with legal, and because of that, like a comp plan should not be a kitchen sink of every spiff idea or every lever you've ever come up with ever, right? It needs to be clean. It needs to be straightforward. It needs to be simple. It needs to be predictable. So working with finance and FP&A, and working with legal, working with HR, and getting a standardized system, and recognizing the fact that when we rolled out these new plans, it was not a top-down approach of like, here's our targets, let's do some division, throw some rates on to get to oversubscription number and a comp cost. We ran it bottoms up too. We, as I said earlier, we back checked against rep performance and how they did. If we take last year and how would they perform, and we tuned things because we didn't want to underpay. We did the math for the reps as well. We said we know we're changing things. We took your bookings from last year and your deals. Here's how it would pay out under this plan. So we showed that to them. It is easy when you're sort of in the throes of doing the work to think that it's just math. It is math, but this is how people pay feed their families. I mean, this document tells them how they're going to pay for their kids' school. These things matter, so we treated them with as much respect and care as we could.
No, and I think that's great. And I know we've got a couple takeaways here just to dive into that. And there's been a couple questions about this in the chat panel as well about ramp, and I know there's planning for the unexpected here, so if we can touch on that as well.
Yeah, so kind of as Ethan pointed out, like the back checking is probably one of the most important parts of communicating with your reps. Like you want them to know that they were at the center of the planning process. You're making all these changes to make them successful. What doing that back checking actually would do for your reps is showing like, hey, Ethan, this is how much you would have made under this new plan. You're making less, but that actually means you shouldn't be doing these 6 things you were doing last year because they're not super valuable to the business. And if you put that effort here, you actually will make as much or more. You know, you're having a really honest conversation of what are the behaviors that matter. The other thing, these are legal documents. So in most jurisdictions in the United States, they are due to the rep before the beginning of the year, before the quota period starts. And your reps don't know this. I'm not going to tell them. But if they don't get the plan, they are able to choose from the higher or the lower of either the old plan or the new plan. So like if the old plan would have, sorry, they choose a higher. If the old plan would have paid more, you have to pay them under the old plan. If the new plan would have paid more, you keep paying them on the new plan. That is like tremendously complicated, and if you are found to be doing that, you also are going to owe the state some sort of penalties. The third thing is, and these are just like other points that we've seen, it's like everyone's like, oh, I never expected this. Like, so you didn't expect you would hire new reps? Like, think about what ramp looks like and any terms and conditions you would need to adjust for ramp. Think about what it means if you got a $2 million deal closed by an inside sales rep 3 weeks after they started. Like, so these things can happen. Don't be surprised by them. And probably like the most like egregious, like embarrassing one that we see is no one thinks about family leave and how that would work. So like, oh, whoa. So like, did you forget that in the 5 million years that the human species have existed, people have children? And, you know, the side effect of that is like, if you are looking to recruit more women to your sales team, these are the things that kind of play into their decision making. And these are the things that are like real considerations that they need to make. So don't be silent on these things. You know they're going to happen. Think about them in advance.
No, I think, and on the family leave point, we have a whole other side. I mean, it was a heated conversation about the right way to do that. So we can dive in more if folks are interested. We'll share that afterwards. So let's jump into Q&A here for the last couple of minutes. And we've got a bunch here. One of the first ones, and I want to just double click into something that you both had talked about a little bit with like planning for ramp. What are some best practices or first principles people should think about when they're planning for ramping new reps? And Sanj, maybe let's start with you a little bit on this, and then we can hear Ethan what you do for your different
Sure.
for your different you know, segments.
Yeah. So I guess like earlier in my career on the finance side, we would think about ramp being like this protracted thing that had a draw with it, and you know, ramp periods were 3 to 6 months depending on what market you were selling into. That's phenomenally inefficient. So our recommendation now is maybe minimize those drop periods to 1 month and then focus on those leading indicator behaviors. So if you're expecting your rep to start generating pipe, part of their ramp comp should be more heavily weighted to pipeline generation. If it's about having more conversations with like existing customers, tie it to that, but tie it much more specifically and concretely to the activities that are going to generate revenue in the future, instead of just like, you'll figure out the sales process. You're going to have a kind of more robust data set to evaluate that person with.
And Ethan, anything else to add on the ramp front before I throw some more questions at us?
No, that's pretty straightforward. I think Sanj covered it. I mean, I would double down on the notion of, we all sort of think it's some period of time, just do that, give them a couple of months, and what Sanj has suggested as far as pull it forward and pull some of those gates forward. You'd be amazed at the behavior that you can drive.
Yeah, train them early on the right things to do, and I'm sure that carries forward throughout. Another great question coming in here from Christy, works with a lot of early stage startups. They really love the player coach role. Christy, I'm sorry, there's a lot of research that shows that's nearly impossible. It will never work. I'm sorry. But in the event that you have to build a comp plan for a player coach role, where should folks think about starting? Ethan, is this something you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see the note there. I think Christy says she doesn't like it either. I don't think anybody does. It has its place, right? It has its place. Its place is not, I'm going to park somebody as a sales manager over a team for 6 months to avoid having to hire somebody. That's not the purpose of Player Coach. What it is an interesting opportunity for a finite period of time to enable someone to assist with or to develop skills and see and showcase some skills that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to share. But from a comp standpoint, no change in comp, right? You've got your number, you've got your job, do your job. This is simply for you to flex and to stretch into a broader role within the organization for a finite period of time. I don't recommend changing comp at all.
Yeah, we had a whole, oh, go ahead, Sanj, sorry.
Oh, I would just add, like, I mean, player coach is like terrible, right? It's totally ridiculous. Like, you're either training the person to do that job or you are closing deals yourself. Like, if the clients you're working with are really held to the player coach model, they really need to, like, that to me is more symptomatic of, like, they're not like seeing the big picture of how comp and productivity need to work together. They're not actually understanding rep productivity and how to maximize that, because that's what that coach should be doing.
Yeah, totally true.
So I think you try to move them to pushing that quota back on the players.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the behavior that you want out of those folks, right? You want them to have a high-performing team, and we're going to have to backfill for that at some point. We are actually at time. There's a bunch more questions here. We'll probably follow up with some of these folks asynchronously after the fact. Sanj and Ethan, in our last sort of 30 seconds here, any one thing that you want folks just tweet length to take away from our session here today? We covered a whole lot of ground. And Ethan, let's start with you. Just a tweet length takeaway for our audience today.
Suspend disbelief. Let the math tell you what to do.
Love it. Sanj, tweet length takeaway.
Optimize productivity, commissions. I think that's 26 characters.
Sanj, Ethan, I every time I hear this, there's still something that makes me feel uncomfortable, but the math is there, the data is there. Ethan is living proof of some of these maybe not intuitive concepts or things that are not conventional wisdom in sales. I want to thank you both for sharing this program today and taking some time out of your days to share your perspective and your stories around this. Comp is such an integral part to setting your team up for success, and I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation today.
Happy to do it. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. And stay safe, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, y'all.
Go vote.